What if morality was never about right or wrong, but about control? Every man is raised to believe that being good will make him respected, loved, and successful. But look closer at the world around you. Who rises? Who commands? It's rarely the man who clings to virtue. It's the one who understands when to let it go. Machiavelli knew this 500 years ago. He saw that morality, when worshipped blindly, becomes a leash, one the powerful gladly hand to those too afraid to drop it. A man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets what destroys him. Those weren't the words of a villain, but of a man who understood the cost of purity in a corrupt world. We've been told that goodness guarantees reward. But history whispers a darker truth. Morality often protects the wicked and punishes the sincere. The kind are exploited. The loyal are discarded. The honest are silenced. And the powerful, they play by different rules entirely. So the question isn't whether morality matters. It's whether your morality serves you or enslaves you. Because once you see what Machiavelli truly meant by virtue, you'll never look at good and evil the same way again. Most men will live their whole lives under moral hypnosis, worshipping rules written by their rulers. But you're about to wake up. The myth of morality begins now. From the moment you were a boy, you were told that good men win, that honesty is rewarded, that kindness returns to you, that virtue is the foundation of all success. But deep down, you've seen the cracks in that illusion. You've watched the manipulator get promoted, while the honest worker stays overlooked. You've seen the loyal boyfriend abandoned for the thrill seeker. You've felt the sting of doing the right thing and losing anyway. That's not a coincidence. It's a design. Society teaches morality not to create justice, but to create order. It trains you to feel guilt when you resist, shame when you question, and fear when you assert. Morality becomes the invisible fence that keeps men obedient without chains. You don't need to be locked up if your mind already polices itself. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He observed how rulers praised virtue publicly while discarding it privately, because moral citizens are predictable, and predictable men are controllable. The myth that goodness wins was never meant for those in power. It was meant for those beneath them. Look closer at history. The saints are celebrated only after their deaths, when they can't threaten the system that betrayed them. The strong are called ruthless, the cunning, evil, yet it's their names carved into empires. The myth of morality blinds the masses, while the few who question it shape the world. Morality, in its purest form, is a beautiful idea. But in practice, it's a contract, one written by those who profit when you obey. And that's the real tragedy. Most men defend their own cage, believing it makes them noble. The question now becomes, if morality is a myth, what replaces it? Machiavelli's answer was dangerous, and it changed the course of history. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, he shattered one of humanity's most sacred illusions, that morality is the foundation of power. He wrote, "A wise ruler cannot, and should not, keep his word when it is against his interest." In those few words, he declared war on 1,000 years of moral doctrine. To most, it sounded blasphemous. But Machiavelli wasn't glorifying deceit or cruelty. He was documenting reality. He had watched virtuous men fall while ruthless pragmatists ruled. He saw Florence, a city of idealists, consumed by the cunning of those who pretended to be moral, while playing an entirely different game behind closed doors. He realized something that few ever dare to admit: morality is only valuable when it serves survival. The moment it becomes a liability, it must be replaced with strategy. Machiavelli's true genius was in separating appearance from action. He taught that a man should appear virtuous, kind, loyal, honest, because morality inspires trust. But he must never become enslaved to it. A wise man uses morality as a weapon, not a weakness. That's why he admired Cesare Borgia, a man who combined charm with ruthlessness, grace with calculation. Borgia's enemies called him a devil. Machiavelli saw him as the prototype of controlled power, a man who understood that perception rules reality. Machiavelli wasn't advocating evil. He was exposing the physics of power. In a world governed by deception, The naive man who clings to moral absolutes becomes predictable, and predictability is death. He believed that virtue wasn't about goodness at all. It meant excellence, adaptability, and the courage to act when others hesitate. True virtue to Machiavelli was the ability to shape events, to bend chaos toward one's purpose, even when morality resists. This is the truth society hides from you. Power rewards clarity, not purity. Those who understand when to suspend morality temporarily for a greater vision move the world forward. Those who cannot get moved by it. That's why Machiavelli was exiled, condemned, and labeled dangerous. Not because he was wrong, but because he told men how power really works. And even now, 500 years later, the same truth stands. Morality keeps the weak obedient, while necessity makes the strong untouchable. But the question remains, what happens to the man who dares to live by this truth? What does it cost him, psychologically, to step beyond morality itself? That's where the real danger begins. The most dangerous prisons aren't built from stone, they're built from guilt. Every man who's been taught to do the right thing no matter what carries an invisible weight. It whispers, you must please, you must obey, you must be good, even if it destroys you. That's not morality. That's conditioning from childhood. Boys are rewarded for compliance, not courage. They're praised for being nice, for sharing, for not fighting back, and punished when they show dominance, assertiveness, or defiance. Slowly, a deep fracture forms. The man's natural instinct for strength is buried beneath a desperate hunger for approval. That fracture never heals. It just hides. It's why so many men feel torn between what they want to do and what they should do. They know they're being used, but they can't stop saying yes. They sense injustice, but they stay silent. Because somewhere deep inside, morality has become synonymous with worth. Machiavelli would call it a form of self-imposed slavery. He understood that a man obsessed with being good loses the ability to be effective. The world rewards not purity, but power, and morality, when taken as absolute, dulls the blade of action. That's the real psychological cost. Guilt becomes the leash, and approval becomes the cage. You don't need to be controlled externally if your own conscience does it for them. Think about it. How many times have you silenced your truth because you didn't want to seem cruel? How many opportunities have you missed because you feared being judged? That's the tax morality charges on power, paralysis. But here's the paradox Machiavelli revealed. Morality has value only when it's chosen, not imposed. When a man obeys morality blindly, he's a slave. But when he uses morality strategically, when he decides when to be kind, when to be ruthless, he becomes free. The psychological battle isn't about good versus evil. It's about freedom versus obedience. And every man must choose which master he'll serve. But if morality can weaken the mind, how is it used on a mass scale? Because in the modern world, morality has become more than an idea. It's become a weapon. We live in an age where morality has been industrialized, packaged, branded, and sold to the masses as a badge of identity. But this isn't real virtue. It's performance. It's marketing. Today, morality isn't about character. It's about optics. People don't strive to be good. They strive to look good. They signal virtue like currency, spending it to gain status, validation, and immunity from criticism. It's no longer about truth. It's about applause. This is the modern trap Machiavelli warned of centuries before social media existed. When morality becomes public theater, it stops guiding human behavior and starts manipulating it. The system thrives on moral outrage, because outrage keeps people divided and distracted. Every tweet, every comment, every public scandal, it's not about justice, it's about control. The moment you moralize something, you polarize it. And when people are busy judging each other, they stop questioning who benefits from the chaos. Corporate campaigns preach morality while exploiting workers. Politicians sermonize about integrity while funding corruption. Influencers perform empathy on camera while chasing attention behind the scenes. Modern virtue has been weaponized, turned into a psychological technology for compliance. And the more you try to live up to this impossible standard, the more power you give away. You become terrified of saying the wrong thing, thinking the wrong thought, breaking the wrong code of conduct. That's not morality. That's mental surveillance. Machiavelli would laugh at how predictable the game has become. He knew that when morality becomes collective performance, the real power belongs to those who pretend best. Because while everyone else is acting righteous, the strategist is quietly calculating. That's why today's moral system doesn't create leaders. It creates followers terrified of moral exile. The crowd rewards conformity, not clarity. But here's the twist. Once you see virtue as a weapon, you can learn to wield it instead of being wounded by it. You can choose when to display it, when to conceal it, and when to break it entirely. Because the man who understands morality's function no longer fears it, he commands it. And yet, there's still a price. The moment you stop playing by society's moral script, you pay for it, not in theory, but in blood, in reputation, in loneliness. That's the cost of freedom, and it's the next truth. Machiavelli never sugarcoated. Freedom sounds romantic, until you realize what it demands. The moment a man stops worshiping morality, he becomes dangerous. Not because he turns evil, but because he no longer plays by emotional blackmail. He stops apologizing for existing, stops kneeling for approval. And that, to a world built on moral obedience, is unforgivable. Machiavelli lived this truth. After writing The Prince, he was accused of corruption, tortured, and exiled from Florence. His only crime? Exposing the game. He pulled back the curtain on power, and the moral order punished him for it. History repeats itself. Every man who rejects moral conformity becomes a target of those who depend on it. The first cost is isolation. When you begin to see the illusion, the crowd turns cold. Old friends drift away. Conversations become shallow. You start noticing how much of the world's morality is performance, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Then comes condemnation. You'll be labeled arrogant, cold, heartless. Not because you are, but because you can't be guilt-tripped anymore. People who rely on moral leverage feel powerless around you, so they attack you to restore balance. Finally, there's loneliness. True independence feels like exile before it feels like freedom. You begin to live in a different psychological landscape, one where approval means nothing and results mean everything. It's quiet there, brutally quiet, but it's also the first time your thoughts belong entirely to you. Machiavelli understood that freedom costs comfort, that sovereignty costs belonging. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved." If you cannot be both, not because fear is superior, but because love, when given conditionally, is another form of control. Breaking free means accepting misunderstanding as your new companion. It means choosing truth over acceptance, clarity over comfort. And yet, those who endure that exile become unshakable. They lose the world's approval, but gain something rarer, self-respect rooted in truth. Not performance. Because once you stop begging to be seen as good, you can finally start being real. The cost of freedom is steep, yes. But what's the cost of obedience? A lifetime of pretending. And for the thinking man, that's far too high a price. Freedom without discipline becomes chaos. Power without principle becomes corruption. Machiavelli never said to abandon morality entirely. He said to command it. This is where most men misunderstand him. They think rejecting morality means embracing cruelty. But Machiavelli's wisdom was subtler. He believed morality must serve strategy, not enslave it. He called this virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but the power to act decisively, to adapt, to bend events toward your will. In Machiavellian philosophy, a man with virtue chooses his principles like a warrior chooses his weapons, deliberately, situationally, and without apology. Strategic virtue means you control your code. You decide when to be merciful and when to be merciless. You understand that kindness without strength is submission, but strength without restraint is destruction. Power is balance, not between good and evil, but between what is necessary and what is foolish. The key is awareness. Every action must serve purpose. Every display of morality must have intent. You are moral when it strengthens your position, silent when it protects your plans, and ruthless when the moment demands it. This doesn't make you inhuman. It makes you conscious. The average man obeys rules written for him. The sovereign man writes his own. That's why Machiavelli's teachings were never about cruelty. They were about clarity. The ability to look reality in the eye without flinching. To say, yes, I will act according to necessity, even when others hide behind virtue to justify an action. Strategic virtue is mastery over impulse. It's the discipline to appear calm when provoked, to act compassionate when it wins trust, to strike without hesitation when cornered. It's moral aikido, turning the world's expectations into your advantage. And here's the paradox. The man who learns to command morality becomes more moral than those who obey it blindly. Because he acts from reason, not guilt. From principle, not programming. This is what separates the manipulated from the masterful. When you control your virtue, you control your fate. And when you control your fate, you become untouchable. So now you know the truth. Machiavelli hid beneath centuries of moral comfort. Morality has a price, and most men are paying it without realizing. They trade their freedom for approval, their clarity for comfort, their strength for belonging. They kneel to a moral system that rewards obedience and punishes independence, and they call it virtue. But you've seen behind the curtain. You know that morality, like any tool, only has power when you control it. The man who serves morality becomes predictable, a pawn in someone else's game. The man who commands it becomes sovereign. That's the ultimate Machiavellian secret. Not to reject morality, but to master it. To appear virtuous when it opens doors, and to act decisively when it closes them. To be good by choice, not by fear. Most men will never reach this level of awareness. They'll keep chasing approval, mistaking guilt for goodness and morality for meaning. But not you. You've crossed a line you can't uncross. Now, every moral rule you once followed blindly will whisper a new question. Does this serve my strength? Or my submission? Because once you ask that, you're no longer moral. You're powerful.